While Romania is a great country to live in and I appreciate so many things about it, there are also things I don't like about it. And in this video, I wanted to share the top 3 things that I don't like about Romania. The first one on my list is the victim mentality of a lot of people who live in Romania. And the way I define it, it's this thinking pattern, this mentality that everything is bad and everyone is out there to get you, and the way your life looks like, it's other people's fault. So basically, a lot of Romanians like to blame the government for their life, the president, the mayor, everyone except themselves. Romania had a very difficult history. Yes, we went through decades of communism and it was tough and there was a lot of scarcity and the conditions were difficult for everybody. Yes. After communism, we dealt with a lot of corruption and a lot of poverty and lack of opportunity. Yes, I also agree with that. But I think the only free will we have in this life is how do we react to what's happening in our lives. And there are only 2 options here. One, to blame everyone else and to think that it's everyone else's fault but yours. And 2, to take accountability for your life and to know that you can absolutely change your life. And a lot of them think that the government is out there to get them, that the mayor and the local community is out there to get them, that their mother-in-law is out there to get them. Like, everyone is their enemy and everyone is making these plots to get them and to make their life more difficult. And there are also people who don't think like that. There are people who are saying, yes, this is a shitty situation, but I can't control which country I was born in. I can't control that I was born in Romania, right? Like, I can't control that I was born into my particular family. I can't control that I was born in scarcity. Like, I can't, we cannot control any of that. But we can control how do we react to it, right? And there are people who do take accountability for their life and for building the life that they want. And I do believe that I'm one of those people. And every single dream I ever had, I accomplished. And I was born in Romania, not even in the capital city. I'm from Oradea, a city with 200,000 people. I don't come from a rich family. We were poor growing up. We barely had money to pay the bills. I was always getting clothes from secondhand stores. Like, we didn't have an easy life growing up here. And yet, that didn't prevent me from getting a full scholarship from an Ivy League university in the US. That didn't prevent me from getting a PhD from another Ivy League university in the US. That didn't prevent me from getting a job at a top management consulting firm in New York City. That didn't prevent me from leaving the entire corporate world behind and my entire American dream behind to return and rebuild my life and reinvent myself and create a life in which I have now both time and financial freedom. And I truly believe that there's nothing special about me. I don't have special skills. I don't have anything that I have and other people don't have. I just always believed in myself. I always took accountability for my life. I always dreamed big, and I knew that accomplishing my big dreams is possible. And I think if all the Romanians would have this mentality, we would be so much further along than we currently are. And instead of gossiping, instead of always venting to people, instead of creating scenarios of how Everyone is against you. If people would put all of that energy into building something, into changing their mindset, into creating the life of their dreams, we would be much further along. And I truly believe that's possible. I've seen it in my life. I've seen it in other Romanians' lives. It is absolutely possible to not let your circumstances define you, to rise above the circumstances, to take accountability of your life, to find solutions, to have a positive mentality. And when you do that, surprisingly, opportunities appear. You get ideas, you meet the right people, but it all starts with you believing you can. And I truly hope that in the next decade, more people are going to shift the way they think, and they are going to get out of this victim mentality and truly take accountability for their lives, because it's absolutely possible. The second thing on my list is the fact that our education system is based on memorizing and not learning critical thinking. And I do think this is a problem that stems from the communist time, where people were just not allowed to have different opinions and everyone had to think the same thing, and they were being told what to say and what to think and what to do. But it's been 35 years since communism ended, and our education system stayed the same. It's still based on memorizing essays, memorizing facts, and it's not based on learning to think, which I think it's a big mistake. And I want to give you an example from my life. So I was born and raised in Romania. I was part of the education system here. I went to school in Romania. And for example, when we were having Romanian literature classes, our entire class was the teacher coming to class and reading an essay from a book, or maybe an essay she wrote, and us literally writing that essay in our notebooks word by word. And we had to memorize that entire essay, and in the next class they would actually assess how well we memorized the essay. So it was never about you read a book and then you come up with your own opinion of the book. You interpret the book by yourself, and then in class you discuss about the book and then you hear other opinions. No. It was all about memorizing the essay she gave you. And there were usually a few brave souls in the class that would raise their hand when the teacher would read the essay, and they would actually say, hey, I actually don't agree with this. I think the character did this because of a different reason. And the teachers would get so mad when that happened. They would think that's a sign of disrespect. How can you have a different opinion that's not the opinion of this author, or that's not my opinion? And you cannot say things like that. Usually they would give them like a grade of 4 out of 10, which means like they would not pass the class, right? If they continue doing things like this. So this was the education system I grew up in. And then I moved to the US. I was in college in New York City. And we had this core curriculum in college where we had to take literature and philosophy and art and music and all this good stuff. So my very first semester of college, I took literature. And they told us to read a few chapters of a book. And then I went to class, and of course, being familiar with the Romanian educational system, I was expecting the professor to read an essay and then we take notes, or we write the exact same essay, and then the next time we memorize the essay. And to my surprise, the professor comes in and he's like, so what did you think about the book? And then everyone in the class who was, American or maybe Canadian, they raised their hand and they were expressing their opinions of what they thought about the book, what they liked about the book, what they didn't like about the book, what they learned from the book. And I was just sitting there in shock, like, what is happening right now? Why is everyone arguing? Like, am I allowed to have an opinion? Like, what is this? And it was a huge cultural shock for me to know that I can have an opinion. I can argue an opinion. It was something completely different to what I experienced in the Romanian system. And I'm not gonna lie, it took me a while to adjust and get used to it, because when you go from not having to think and just memorizing to actually having to think and form a coherent opinion and argue that opinion with arguments and basically having critical thinking, it takes a while to adjust to the new system. But I mean, those 4 years of college and everything that I experienced in my professional life after, it taught me this skill of how to argue, how to present an idea, how to defend an idea, how to hear different opinions, how to be okay with different opinions, how to not take different opinions personal. And it's like all these skills that are so valuable in life, in whatever you choose to do, in work environments, at home, with your personal relationships. I think critical thinking and being able to see different opinions, being able to form an opinion based on facts and based on what you read and research about, that's so crucial, and it's a skill that everyone should have. And to talk to young people here or to their parents and to realize that the Romanian education system hasn't changed at all in the last 15 years that I was gone, and people are still expecting children to memorize essays, to memorize facts, that critical thinking is not encouraged, that it's not taught in schools, that children are not encouraged to form their own opinions. I think that's very sad. I think it's very sad that we're not even starting to go down that route. And I truly hope that it changes. I truly hope that children at least learn the skill of critical thinking. And even if you acquire just one skill in school, because let's be real, a lot of the stuff you learn in school is not going to be helpful in your life. But if there's one helpful thing, is critical thinking. And I really, really hope that the system changes to reflect this. Third thing on my list is the lack of emotional intelligence of a lot of people in Romania. And I think here things are starting to change a little bit, but we still have a lot of work to do as a nation. And just to give you some examples, and I think I can speak on behalf of a lot of people that grew up in post-communist Romania, and maybe even before that, but our parents, when they had us, they thought that if they give us a roof over our heads and if they put food on the table, that's enough to raise a child. And being emotionally present is not important. Then when children were doing something naughty, the first reaction would be to either yell at the children, tell him or her some really nasty stuff, or to physically beat him. And instead of trying to understand what the underlying problem is, right, like making the child feel safe, making the child feel like they can communicate with you as parents, that you're there to understand him and guide him in life, a lot of Romanians, and I think this is also true for Eastern Europe as a region, a lot of people would just beat their kid, yell at their kid, make fun of their kid. When we were in school, right, a lot of the times we were compared to other kids. So if we got a grade of, let's say, 8 out of 10 on a test and the friend would get 10 out of 10, the kid who got an 8, the parents would always be, Why can't you be like your friend, whatever? Why could they get a 10 and you got an 8? And then you would feel worthless, right? Like you would feel like your parents don't love you. You would feel like you can't have unconditional love, right? You always have to do something, you have to perform, you have to be able to accomplish things to be worthy of the love of your parents. And these are just a few examples, but I think overall, Romanians and I think Eastern Europeans in general were great at making sure, you're well fed, you have clothes, you go to school, and you have a house to live in. But they didn't really put a lot of effort into the emotional side of being a parent. And I think that led to a lot of trauma that at least my generation incurred. And that led to us having to go to therapy, to work through all of this, and to basically focus more on our own emotional intelligence and making sure that when we have kids, we're able to parent them in a much better way than just the physicalities of being a parent. Another example I have in this bucket is mental health. I think that at least when I was growing up here in Romania, if we heard that someone went to a therapist, we would immediately label that person as crazy. We would label them as mentally ill, like they are literally crazy and they should be in a mental health hospital. And it was something that you wouldn't do because of this social stigma that there's something wrong with you, that you're crazy. What would people think, right? If I go to a therapist. So basically, virtually nobody was going to therapy when I was here 15 years ago. And for me, living in the US, it truly opened my eyes to mental health and how to take care of myself and how to prioritize mental health, right? Because I feel like everyone focuses on physical health, but at the end of the day, you also have to take care of your mental health. It's probably even more important than your physical health at the end of the day. And, in the US, it's so common to go to therapy, to tell your friends that you're going to therapy. Nobody hides it. It's literally something like, oh, I went to get my blood drawn to get my medical tests once a year. Oh, I go to therapy once a week because I want to live a better life and I want to learn more about myself and I want to develop myself as a person. It's something so natural and so many people do it, and it's not stigmatized at all. So I went to therapy. I love going to therapy. I think it's so helpful. You truly get to know yourself as a person. You get to change things about yourself. You get to be better. You get to learn how to cope with your life and what's happening in your life in a much easier and better way and healthier way. And you learn how to process your emotions. You basically learn emotional intelligence in therapy, which is something that we lack as a country here in Romania. And I think even now in Romania, I do see some of my friends here going to therapy, posting on social media about it. But when I read the comments, a lot of them are like, thank you so much for talking about this because it's still such a taboo topic. It still has a lot of stigma about it. A lot of people still judge you for going to therapy. And of course, you get all the troll comments and the hate comments of like, you're crazy, like, you should be in a hospital, like all of that idiotic stuff. And I feel like for us to fully heal as people, to heal maybe even as a nation, I think we need to release all those emotions that we buried throughout the years. We need to learn how to be less reactive, to yell less. And instead of doing that, wouldn't it be so much better to learn how to process your emotions in a healthy way and to understand what triggers you and to work on the stuff that triggers you so it's no longer a trigger in the future. I personally think that everyone should go to therapy. I think it's the most natural thing and the healthiest thing you can do for you as a human being. And I really hope that one day it becomes a very normal topic here. I hope that everyone goes, and I hope that there's a lot more open conversation about it so people know that it's totally normal. There's no stigma. It's actually really helpful and it's good for your development. So these were the 3 things on my list. Let me know what else you would add. I'll see you in the next one.